Hello, it is time for the games I played in December. Throughout the month, I found myself once again back to playing Elden Ring Nightreign. This time though, to check out the Forsaken Hollows DLC. As I have mentioned maybe too often, I really like Nightreign, and as this is just more Nightreign, I like it a lot as well. The new map provides a ton of verticality, creating an entirely different type of challenge than Limveld. There are so many layers to it, and it is very easy to get lost between them, which I really appreciate. A big part of what I love about Nightreign is the learning process, and the base map is one that has sort of felt solved to me for a while. Certainly I am always finding some new stuff to engage with to get through areas and encounters more quickly, but by and large, runs were starting to feel pretty optimized. However, with the new map, I feel like I still have a ton to learn, and I am enjoying that process of learning it. The two new classes are both really fun. I love there being a more support-oriented class with the Scholar, and Undertaker's ult is one of my favorite mechanics in the game. Zooming across the battlefield and also being able to trigger it for free whenever someone else uses their ult is just so much fun and has some neat synergies. The most obvious and chaotic being playing as 3 Undertakers and just cycling ults constantly. The new Night Lords are fun and weird, and yeah, it's been a great reason to jump back into a game I really love. I guess we will see how often my friends want to play it, but I feel like it will add at least another 30 hours of playtime for me. Nightreign is probably in my top 3 games of the year, which I did not expect when I first played it, but it is what it is. I also played Gunfrog, a game where you play as a frog with a gun. It's physics-based, so you move around largely by shooting your gun in the opposite direction you want to go. And you know, it's fun enough. The system is fairly unwieldy, so the movement tech feels limited, and it never really evolves into much, but the novelty of being a frog with a gun in its mouth largely is able to carry it through its short runtime. There are a bunch of locations and bosses, but they all end up feeling about the same. You press a few buttons around the map, waves of enemies come at you from either the water or the sky, and then a big version of the enemy comes at you, which is the boss. At least from what I noticed, there isn't that much of a difference between enemy types aside from the direction they attack you from, which I think was a missed opportunity, especially with the bosses. They really just zoom right at you, and you kind of have to rely on them getting stuck on some part of the level to have a good chance of taking them out. I wish each of them had more of a gimmick. For instance, there's this snake boss, and I thought it would be cool if you could hit his head from the side and cause him to change directions or something along those lines. This would have added some actual strategy to the fight. Instead, it was me trying to spam shots from as far away as I could while he got blocked by a tree. As things currently stand, fights feel like they require some amount of luck. Admittedly, part of this is because I decided to play on hard mode, a choice I would not have made if I understood how the fights actually worked, and so I would imagine that on normal there is more room for error. If you decide to pick this game up, that is what I would recommend playing on. There is just a bit too much jankiness to make a hard mode all that fun. Frankly, while a game like this was unlikely to become my next favorite of all time, I do think playing it on hard made me enjoy it significantly less, as it kind of felt like I was just bashing my head against a wall, but like not in the fun way, and instead in the I don't really know why it worked that time way. But speaking of good ways to bash your head against a wall, after finishing up Gunfrog, I played what was easily one of my favorite games of the year, Angeline era. It centers around bumping into enemies to attack them, and despite this simple setup, the encounter design is so thoughtful and stellar that it never gets tiring. There is a depth to it that feels surprising given this simple premise. It has some of the most inspired bosses I've seen in a long time. For instance, one of the early ones essentially has you playing Pong against a guy while also shooting at him and avoiding his laser shots at you. There is just so much creativity on display, and whether it be bosses or regular encounters, there's always a few interesting things to juggle that brings just the right amount of challenge. Every aspect of the game feels so playful. One of the core mechanics is the ability to search a square, which can be done in individual levels as well as in the overworld. In fact, searching is how you access the levels at all. More often than not, where you need to search is pretty straightforward, but there are plenty of levels hidden away, and it's so satisfying when you recognize some small aspect that feels off and then are rewarded with a new new level for searching there. There's also a nice balance here between rewards that progress your character in some way and experiential rewards. My dopamine-saturated brain sometimes struggles when I don't get a shiny new thing that makes number go up, but honestly, I never felt disappointed in Angeline era when a secret area didn't have some sort of typical reward, which is a testament to how engaging these bits can be. If the design of an area results in getting me to laugh or think holy shit, that will always stick with me more meaningfully and longer than it resulting in a tiny stat increase, and this game pulled that off multiple times. To be clear, there was also enough typical progression to satisfy the part of my brain that I fear is broken, and in fact I think that is part of what lets those other moments stand out as something special. It is a disruption from the typical expectation. Angeline Era is a simple looking game with tremendous depth, and it rewards curiosity and attentiveness in a way that the best games do. Furthermore, its story goes places. I don't know, I kind of want to make a video or do a podcast discussion trying to break down various elements of it, as there is a lot to dissect. It also walks this line between being both grounded and absurd, leading to these moments where pretty ridiculous things will happen, and at first you kind of just want to laugh it off, but then you start considering if it's actually a deep metaphor for imperialism, and you feel both like a genius and an idiot for even thinking it. The uncertainty of both its gameplay and narrative make it a very interesting game to think and talk about, and yeah, I would encourage you all to play it so that I can have more people to think and talk about it with. One bit of advice I would have is to consider playing on a higher difficulty. I played on Inferno, which felt perfect for me as it got me to engage with a bunch of different aspects of the gameplay, and while I don't know your exact skill level at games, I do think this is the kind of title where it's best to go outside your comfort zone a little bit. With that said, you know you better than I know you, probably, so do what makes sense. To finish up the month, I played Strange Antiquities, the sequel to Strange Horticulture, which actually was one of the last games I played in 2024. Antiquities is the kind of sequel where I think it's better than its predecessor in pretty much every conceivable way, from the theming to the complexity to the puzzles to the story, but that doesn't necessarily mean I liked it more. And that pretty much comes down to it being more of the same. You run a shop where people will ask for an item to help with some issue, and then you'll use various books to identify which of the items in your shop is the one they need. Alongside that, there are a few other puzzles tied to the shop and the wider city you're in that change things up just enough to keep it all from getting too repetitive. There is more variety here, and the solutions aren't as easy to come by, but for the most part, it largely feels like Strange Horticulture, but with more experience and money behind it. And that's not bad. I think for some, it actually is quite good. However, as I've talked about before, as I've gotten older and done this job more and more, something I really value is playing stuff that surprises me. And unfortunately, Antiquities did not do that for me. To be clear, this firmly is a me problem, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of you approach games in a similar way. So if you haven't played either of these titles, I would highly recommend checking out Strange Antiquities, as I think it is a really polished deduction game that will keep your mind buzzing throughout its runtime. If you have already played Strange Horticulture though, I'd say just ask yourself what you typically look for in a sequel, and choose accordingly. Aside from me wishing for something that felt a bit more fresh, my only real gripe with the game is that it has a bit of a failure problem. If you guess incorrectly enough times, this dread bar fills up, and then you have to play a dice rolling minigame to lower your dread. It is pretty hard to lose this game, but in the chance that you do, all that happens is you get reset to the start of the day. This feels like a weird consequence, as replaying a day just involves remembering what you gave to customers, and so there isn't much value in having to replay it. There's no skill involved in getting back to where you were. I wish there had been permanent consequences for failure. The game has multiple endings, and so it seems like using failure as a way to influence those would have fit perfectly, but instead it all comes down to choices. Currently, failure just feels like a waste of time that actually opens the door to brute force the solution to puzzles if you really wanted to. Of course, it's unlikely that someone would do this, but I still think it's not ideal. All things considered though, Strange Antiquities is a great game. I just wasn't the person for it. Anyway, that's it. See you next time, unless I decide to stop doing this. The year's up. I finished the year. 2025 is done. Do you think I will continue this in 2026? Do you think? Do you think there's a chance? Does me saying this give you hope? That I'm teasing it like this? Do you have hope? Stop. Stop having hope. Get rid of your hope. Abandon it. But actually, yeah, I'll do January. Just give me like a week. I don't know. I need a bit of time. You're used to waiting, okay? Bye.